Hello and welcome to Press TV's debate. I'm Marcia Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. The Palestinian resistance group Hamas has threatened the start of a new intifada. That is, if U.S. President Donald Trump does what he says, and that is moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Does Trump want the region to explode as Palestinians and others promise an aggressive response? Stay with us as we take a look at the latest situation in occupied Palestinian territory.
The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has issued a stark warning to the U.S. about the consequences of President Donald Trump's possible recognition of Jerusalem Al-Quds as Israel's capital. Hamas said in a statement that Palestinians will revive the intifada or uprising if Trump makes good on his presidential campaign promise to do so. The Palestinian resistance movement added that the decision will give Israel a cover for continuing its crime of Judaizing the city and emptying it of Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority has also warned of the blowback from the U.S. recognition of Al-Quds as the capital of Israel. Mahmoud Habash, an advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, said this would amount to a, quote, complete destruction of the peace process.
As Palestinians, we have witnessed during the last decades a total bias from the American government toward the Palestinian people.
If Mr. Trump take it, it will affect the whole Middle East, because I believe Jerusalem is not only important for the Palestinians, important for a lot of people all over the world, Muslims and Arabs.
Palestinians who opt for resistance as the only way to force Israel into ending its occupation of Palestine say Trump's plan to relocate the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Al-Quds symbolizes the futility of the peace talks. During his election campaign last year, Trump repeatedly promised to move the embassy. In June, however, like his predecessors, Trump signed a 6-month waiver to delay the relocation. The White House said at the time, the question is not if that move happens, but only when. That waiver expires on December the 1st, and the Trump administration has not yet announced whether it will renew it for an additional 6 months. The controversial promise, if fulfilled, will make the U.S. the first country to have its embassy in Al-Quds. All diplomatic missions are in Tel Aviv now. Israel has welcomed any U.S. recognition of its sovereignty over Al-Quds.
I think that the U.S. president knows and understands the needs of the region, and by validating Jerusalem as the eternal united capital of Israel, it's something he declared and wanted, and I think that by implementing it, he's sending an important message.
Khalil Shaheen, a Ramallah-based analyst, argues that the U.S. government is trying to draw out a path for the region at the expense of Palestinians. Trump's frontmen to deal with the Palestinian issue are U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, both known as pro-Zionist by Palestinians.
As a Jerusalem citizen who is living under the Israeli occupation since the 40s, nothing will change to us. U.S. government will always support the Israeli. They don't care about the Palestinians' rights.
Not a single Palestinian trusts the U.S. as an impartial broker in the so-called peace talks. Many of them even do not recognize the talks as the way forward, believing that the only way to deal with the Israeli regime is resistance.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program out of Madison, Wisconsin, Dr. Kevin Baird, editor of Veterans Today, and out of Washington, D.C., President of Middle East Research Center, Mr. Richard Hellman. Thank you both for being with us. Well, let's start this off in D.C. and Richard Hellman. Your perspective, why would Washington decide to transfer its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem when the U.S. administration knows that this issue is very volatile?
Well, it's a very contentious issue to be true. However, the United States Congress in 1995 passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, which says by overwhelming majorities in the House and in the Senate that the United States Embassy in Israel should be in Jerusalem, the capital of the State of Israel. However, in a last-minute move at the request of the State Department and international parties, the Congress put a provision in the law that this could be delayed by 6 months at a time. And everyone thought that it would be delayed 1 or 2 or 3 times. And it's been delayed, I believe, more than 42 times, 6-month periods. But the obligation under the law that the United States Embassy should be in Jerusalem for all of the reasons stated in that law, in the preamble and throughout the law, that law remains in effect. And so President Trump, when he was a candidate, promised that he would do this, and he has been resolute and his administration has been to say that it will do this, but the question is only when and how it will do that. So it appears that the administration is getting closer to a decision. In fact, on the 1st of December, the day before yesterday, if the president had intended to waive this requirement of law once again, he would have signed a waiver. But as far as I have seen, he did not sign such a waiver. Okay. So he said he was going to speak to it on Monday, and there is a possibility that later in the week he will make a statement about the status of Jerusalem and about his latest decision on the issue of where our United States Embassy shall be, in Tel Aviv, which is like New York, the commercial capital, or in Jerusalem, which is like Washington, D.C.
Okay, well, let me get Mr. Barrett in on this discussion. Stay with me, Mr. Hellman. What about that, Mr. Barrett, in your perspective, because that question still was not answered, being that this is such a volatile issue, why would the U.S. do this? And what exactly is President Donald Trump aiming to achieve by transferring the embassy?
Well, first, I should say that the guest's assertion that the United States Congress passed a law dictating this move is absolutely false. That wasn't the United States Congress, sir. That was a bunch of traitors who are basically the Israeli-owned Congress. We know from 6-term Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney that when one is elected to Congress, one is required by the Zionist lobby to sign an oath of allegiance to the state of Israel. Cynthia McKinney refused to sign that oath of allegiance, and she got many, many millions of dollars thrown against her in her efforts to get reelected. So these traitors did pass that bill, but and the other thing the guest lied about is the notion that Jerusalem is the political capital of the genocidal Zionist entity. It is not recognized as the capital of that genocidal entity by any nation on earth. Every single nation on earth and the United Nations all agree that the Israeli war of aggression in 1967 was absolutely illegal and criminal, and that Israel must withdraw from every square inch of stolen land that it took over in that premeditated war of aggression, which it launched with the help of treasonous President Johnson, who helped Israel kill President Kennedy, and then conspired in the murder of more than 30 sailors and the wounding of hundreds on the USS Liberty.
Let me get Mr. Hellman back in on this. Mr. Hellman, stay with me, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Hellman, why would the U.S. make a decision that violates international law?
Where did you, pardon me?
Why would the U.S. make a decision that violates international law? According to Jerusalem should be under the control, actually, of the Palestinians. And why would they go against international law?
No,
we have seen,
that is not.
Go ahead, sir. We have seen with the projects that have been made, the construction that has totally been illegal and continues to be illegal under international law.
That's untrue. Listen, are you a panelist or are you the moderator?
I'm asking you a question. Can you answer it?
Well, that's a loaded question, and it's untrue. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. It has always been for more than 3,000 years.
According to which law? According to which current law, sir?
600 times. According to the Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995, and according to the Israeli law, and according to the to the true international law, not
according to the Zionist psychotics,
not some
like
made
you,
up,
sir,
not some made up, not some made up hysterical statements.
So the UN, according to you, the UN is not sufficient. According to the United Nations, it is illegal. But you said according to Israeli law, it is. So then Israel supersedes the United Nations. Is that what you're telling me?
Every nation can name its own capital. Israel has been resolute in saying that Jerusalem is the capital of the reborn state of Israel.
Has already been named and is already part of another country. Let me cross back over to Madison, Wisconsin. Now, Madison, Wisconsin, Mr. Barrett.
Wait a second.
Stay with me, Mr. Hellman. Stay with me.
It's 2 against 1. Pardon me. This is untrue. The Palestinian Authority is no state and will never be a state again. This is made up by from the People's Republic of Madison, Wisconsin.
So there was never a Palestine, correct? There was never a Palestine.
That's there was, but it was a Greek or island nation. It has no resemblance. It has no. It has nothing to do with the Palestinian Arabs who suddenly invented a state and a people in our lifetime, which made up a history, made up a people, and made up a state.
Quite a take on history. That is quite a take on history. Kevin Barrett, I'll throw it your way. Go ahead, please.
It's the truth. I know you don't have much stomach for truth, but that's the truth. The Palestinian people, when the Jews came back,
Mr. Barrett, Kevin Barrett,
shut up, sir. It's
Kevin Barrett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The reason that Trump picked this moment to set off World War III by setting the Middle East on fire. And of course, that's why the State Department has been deferring the Israeli-owned traitors in Congress and their vote for all these years, because it will set the Middle East on fire. Make no mistake, this will set off an absolute jihad in which not only every one of the world's 1.8 billion Muslims is going to be obligated to defend the holy city of Al-Quds, Jerusalem, but also every one of the world's more than 2 billion Christians, because this genocidal Zionist entity will have stolen the Holy Land of the Muslims and the Christians. But so that's why it has been deferred all these years. Why is Trump now deciding to set the Middle East on fire and launch what will likely become World War III?
Well, let me ask you that. Kevin Barrett, you made an interesting point.
Let me tell him.
Mr. Barrett, Mr. Hellman, listen to me, stay with me. Kevin Barrett, why does the United States want to do that? This is the question. Exactly what you said. It will light things afire. Of course, there would be major reaction. So why do it? How does it benefit Washington?
Because Donald Trump is right now about to be impeached. Because Mike Flynn was caught going to Russia in December, before Trump was president, on behalf of Trump, and he tried to strong-arm the Russian government into vetoing the United Nations resolution that was covertly supported by the Obama administration to essentially deplore the illegal settlements. Flynn went to Russia and begged them to veto that resolution. He did so on behalf of President Trump. So he was acting not as a Russian agent. He, like so many other traitors in this country, was acting as an Israeli agent. He's been caught. That was a violation of the Logan Act. That was a clear act of treason. Trump is about to go down. Trump is about to be impeached for being an agent of the State of Israel, along with Mike Flynn. For that reason, Trump needs to set the Middle East on fire, start World War III by this incredible inflammatory move that automatically sets off an all-out jihad. Every Muslim on earth is going to have to defend Jerusalem now.
All right, well, Richard Hellman,
please,
when Hamas says that it will start a new intifada, what do you think it means?
I think it means that they're a radical terrorist organization with no legitimacy, supported only by perhaps Iran, and they are looking to disavow and destroy the Jewish state of Israel, as the radical Islamist forces have always done, and as Iran wants to do. But I'll tell you why I'll answer the earlier question, why did Trump do this? It's because millions of Bible-believing Christians like myself and many Jews and even some Muslims have said, of course, Jerusalem is the capital of the reborn state of Israel. If later in the course of peace talks, which Iran and Hamas don't believe in, if there is
extremist Zionist lunatics like you.
Kevin, you had enough time.
You believe
Kevin,
that Jesus is supposed to come back on Armageddon
Kevin,
and nuke everybody.
You don't even believe in peace talks, Kevin.
I tell you what, I'm going to jump in here and interrupt both of you. We're going to cross over to our Facebook page and see what our viewers have said about this subject. Let's take a look.
Hamas needs ballistic missiles whose range is enough to reach Israel. They're weak. They can only fire rockets, nothing else. Any missile fired will be responded to by Israel. Trump and his administration regard Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This shows what kind of extremism and ignorance exist in Washington. If Muslim leaders unite this evening, there will be no Israel the next morning. Jerusalem was the capital of Israel many years ago. Why is it an offense now? Where is the Arab League? Perhaps bombing and starving people somewhere else. Resisting the occupation is a duty for all people under occupation, apartheid, and segregation.
Well, you've heard some of the comments. Kevin Barrett, some of our viewers talked about Hamas. And what do you think it would mean if Hamas declares a new intifada?
Well, they certainly will if Trump goes ahead and follows Netanyahu's orders and does this. But what we really need here is an intifada in the United States to overthrow the Zionist occupation here. The Palestinians know that they're occupied, and they certainly will start the biggest intifada ever if this happens, and it will be largely directed at the U.S. People all over the world will start an intifada directed at the U.S. government if the U.S. in fact does this, or if Trump does this. Trump isn't the U.S. Trump is he's been part of the Jewish mob ever since he was set up by Roy Cohn, the biggest Zionist mobster in New York. The people of the United States, one of these days, are going to rise up and overthrow this Zionist occupation. But in the meantime, the Palestinians are going to have to bear the brunt of this. They will start an intifada. It will be supported by billions of people around the world, including many, many millions of us here in the United States who are gradually awakening, thanks to the alternative media, to the fact that our nation has been under Zionist occupation since the USS Liberty massacre of an unarmed spy ship in 1967, when Johnson and the Zionists stole the Holy Land from the Christians as well as the Muslims to hand it to Zionist, psychotic, extremist
Let me get Richard Hellman back in on this. Stay with me, Kevin Barrett. Richard Hellman.
Whenever you open your mouth, Kevin, you're lying.
What would having a new intifada mean for both sides?
I don't believe there will be any intifada that amounts to a hill of beans, because the Palestinian Arabs know that America is the only one that has been supporting them, and nobody else has been supporting them. The Arabs and the Muslims are fed up with the crybaby Palestinian leadership of Ramallah and of Gaza, who cannot govern their people, who have created a hellhole on earth for their people, who have stolen most of the foreign aid, and who are not by any means responsible or even elected government of the Palestinian Arabs. They could have made a paradise for their own people with the help of America and Israel, but instead they have decided to oppress their own people, the Palestinian Arabs, so that they are fleeing the historic region there of Palestine, that is to say today Israel.
How stupid do you think the viewers
territories.
are?
The Arabs and Muslims are fleeing not because,
aren't you?
not because of Israel, but because of the
Kevin Barrett, go ahead, your take.
Palestinian Arab
Stay with me, Richard Hellman. Kevin Barrett, your take on what a new intifada would mean for both sides.
Okay, what we're hearing from Hellman is a perfect illustration of the absolutely psychotic character of the extremist Zionist movement. And what we're going to get with this intifada is, once again, Palestine will explode. But the King of Jordan just last year begged Trump not to do this. He said that he will be immediately overthrown. The government of Jordan is going to be overthrown immediately if this happens, he said. We're likely to see similar situations in other countries, very likely Saudi Arabia, where the leadership is cuddled up with Trump and his Zionist masters like Netanyahu. And so this all is all to the good. These traitors in the Arab world who run Arab countries on behalf of the Zionist movement and the empire deserve to be overthrown. So I think this intifada is likely to spark similar intifadas in many other parts of the world, God willing, including here in the United States, where our Zionist occupation is one of the worst in the world. Zionists have stolen $7 trillion from us here to wage these 9/11 wars on behalf of Israel to break up the 7 countries in 5 years.
Listen,
that General Clark told us about. That was the real purpose of 9/11, was to launch this war.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time.
Is going to be
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I have to thank both of you for being with us. Dr. Kevin Baird, editor of Veterans Today, out of Madison, Wisconsin. Mr. Richard Hellman, President, Middle East Research Center out of Washington, D.C. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us on another debate. I'm Marzia Hashimi, signing out for myself and all the crew right here at Press TV Central. Goodbye. See you next time.